Here's the question. Was Pope Francis rushed back to the Vatican a wee bit too soon? The Pillar reported about the nuncio deciding for himself to install the Archbishop in Detroit. Now, Pope Francis appointed him and announced it, but he never signed the papal bull. The nuncio was like, well, we couldn't get a hold of him. The guy was in the hospital.
And it was very clear that by the end of that 3 minutes, or maybe 2.5 minutes, he was really struggling to breathe. You could see it was really causing him a lot of physical distress. I think it's very strange that throughout his hospitalization, he only had 3 visits, or at least 3 official visits, from the Cardinal Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin.
But what a morbid thought it must be to return to the Vatican knowing that they're all whispering in the shadows about conclaves.
It's because we know everybody dies, we know we must all face our judgment, and yet also we know there will be another pope.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
But yesterday, as we reported, Pope Francis made his debut. First time we've actually seen him as he rolled out onto the balcony before returning to the Vatican. But he did not look good. And his doctors gave us a prognosis, but we've invited senior Vatican correspondent at LifeSiteNews.com, Michael Haynes, to be on with us to give us the update. Michael, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Good to be with you.
So one of my first questions is, did he get sent home too soon? He does not look good. He looks weak. He looks like he's struggling to speak at all, hard to breathe, can't raise his hands. What's the story?
I think you've certainly raised a good point, because he was on that balcony on Sunday for under 3 minutes. He was without oxygen for that time. And it was very clear that by the end of that 3 minutes, or maybe 2.5 minutes, he was really struggling to breathe. You could see it was really causing him a lot of physical distress, having to really work to get that breath in. The doctors said on Saturday in their real shock announcement that he'd apparently been asking for a few days to go home. But I don't think the image that we saw on Sunday, that this didn't look particularly like a man who was really eager to get back to go home. I think something which is possibly playing a larger part in his discharge, but which hasn't been noted as much, is the fact that the doctors said they were concerned about him picking up an infection from the hospital. This is it's quite a common thing in the hospital, that there's a possibility of cross-infection between different wards and so on, especially if you have doctors crossing between wards. But it may have been that they were just about happy enough with his condition to send him back to the Vatican, but arguably perhaps more concerned that he would pick up, perhaps there's an infection going around in the hospital at this time. But really, you saw a bruising on his hands. You could see that his when he tried to lift his arms to give a greeting, he seemed to be having a lot of difficulty even to just do that. So he doesn't look particularly strong in any way, shape or form.
There's been talk or rumors that they have been outfitting the Santa Marta hotel in which he lives with a medical facility so that they can continue to treat him there. Is there any truth to that?
I couldn't speak to that so much. There were some rumors a couple of weeks ago that they were indeed preparing the Santa Marta for his return. Vatican officials, when asked about that at the time, they downplayed it. He's had his little suite there, obviously, for the entirety of his pontificate. Some analysts have noted that, ironically enough, it would be easier for him to receive the medical treatment he needs were he based in the Apostolic Palace, because that was already kitted out for that sort of medical treatment for a pope during the time of Pope John Paul II. But Pope Francis has always enjoyed being amongst people in the Casa Santa Marta, but of course that now is very much the thing which he is ordered not to do. He's ordered to keep a very small circle around him, not do large events and mingle with people.
The other issue that's become more apparent is his ability to govern now. I mean, Parolin said he's seen him less and less. There's I have to believe, a number of things that they need the Pope to make decisions on, but apparently, with hierarchical organization, that everybody can do their jobs, I imagine. But I guess it was reported at the Pillar that the papal nuncio installed the bishop in Detroit without a papal bull in place. That seems highly irregular, and he says it's because the Pope has been sick. We can't get access to him. What does that mean for the greater implications of his health and whether or not he is capable of governing?
Indeed, it does raise this interesting question of the new stage of his pontificate, which a lot of his close aides have been talking about. Now, I know with regards to that particular instance you mentioned from the pillar, they were showing that canonically how it was in order. And also, I think the appointment had been made prior to the Pope's hospitalization. But it will be now a very strange time. I mean, already we saw during his hospitalization that people like Cardinal Arthur Roach, head of the Congregation for Divine Worship, were saying that it's very quiet because they don't have the Pope's normal sort of day-to-day contact. Officials around him have also said it's very quiet. But I think it's very strange that throughout his hospitalization, he only had 3 visits, or at least 3 official visits, from the Cardinal Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, which is peculiar because the governance must continue. Now,
right.
We've seen that Pope Francis is keen to continue with his passion projects, if you like. And I think it's arguably fair to say that one of his main passion projects is the Synod on synodality. So that got the 3-year extension from the hospital. So whether or not we see a sort of a paring back, if you like, in his activity, interspersed with occasional green lighting of large, notable events like that, I think that's fairly possible that that's how it's going to be going forward.
If his health doesn't get better, and that was the other thing that really caught my attention, was when the doctors gave their press briefing the night before they released him, they didn't mention anything about the future. They just, okay, this is what we did, this is where he's at, but they never said anything about what's coming down the road. Is there any sense from your vantage point about his recovery? Do they think he'll have a decent recovery, can kind of get back to, air quotes here, normal activity? I mean, they didn't mention anything about that.
No, you're quite right. They've all the time, even from the beginning of his hospitalization, they've been couching the best possible news as being a return to the Vatican, but they've not really mentioned whether or not there's going to be a return to full mobility or to being able to, say, walk up a flight of stairs very easily. And I don't think that's likely given his long-standing conditions with his lungs. His mobility prior to his hospitalization was already very, very poor over this winter, and this winter particularly so. He had a number of falls. It looks likely that going forward there will be a strong reliance on oxygen for the Pope, whether or not that's all day or parts of the day or perhaps overnight like it has been, remains to be seen. But certainly for this 2 months, it looks like he's going to be needing it almost constantly. As we saw on Sunday, he could barely manage those 2.5 minutes without it. And going forward, I think it's quite likely, if he appears at public events, it will be in his wheelchair, very likely with the nasal cannulas to receive oxygen, just to make sure that he is able to get his breath to deliver maybe some short speeches perhaps, and then he'll give it to his aides like he did over Christmas. But he is an 88-year-old man with a number of health conditions, very poor mobility, particularly in the last couple of years now, and with one lung and one partial lung, he's not got the strongest of foundations to fight this infection.
Surely he must be aware of all of the talk of Conclave and some of the politicking that goes on amongst the Cardinals. Parolin, I think, being the prime candidate there. Fernandez awfully quiet, for that, which is interesting to me. But what a morbid thought it must be to return to the Vatican knowing that they're all whispering in the shadows about conclaves. How do you think he's going to take that?
This is the very strange thing about watching a pope in his final days or final years or months, because we know everybody dies, we know we must all face our judgment, and yet also we know there will be another pope. It's hard to say in one sense. I think the fact that his close circle doesn't officially include any cardinals so far is interesting. Of course, there were rumors that Cardinal Gaylander, his favored canonist, made a visit to the Vatican on a certain day. The Vatican was very swift, interestingly, to say that was completely false. It would be interesting to try and listen to the rumors now to see which cardinals are allowed into that inner circle. It may be that the Pope does shut the doors somewhat, and he has only his secretaries around him in order to prevent any politicking cardinals coming to him seeking to sway his approval to their agenda they'd like to get pushed through, or to try and form a party perhaps in line with his previous agendas or opposed to his previous agendas, depending on how they deem the winds of change to be blowing.
Now, here in America, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I think we've seen this with the nightly rosaries, especially. I think the Cardinals being so public, even though every one of them has denied that there's a conclave air going around, I think they all must realize that it's fairly natural when the Pope, especially a Pope of this age, goes into hospital, there is attention given to the conclave, and they will be looking between themselves also.
Still, I bet it's uncomfortable. But anyway, here in America, there's been a lot of comparisons with Joe Biden and his inability to be aware of his surroundings and the heavy use of the auto pen at the White House to govern our country during his presidency. And people are comparing that to Pope Francis right now and wondering whether or not something similar is going on. And I don't know how that works. Do they have a rubber stamp with Pope Francis's name on it? And if so, why didn't they use it on the papal bull? So in other words, who's governing right now in his absence? Who's making decisions? And is there any, how much abuse can we expect in that process? Well,
in one sense, I think it has been moderately quiet while he has been in hospital. There have been some appointments, bishop appointments, but a lot of the work for those would have been done prior to that because it's a process of many weeks and months. So far, I'm personally not so sort of concerned about that possibility happening. It will be interesting to see going forward, depending on what sort of access we have to even view the Pope to try and get an idea of what kind of mental acuity he has. I did notice something interesting on Sunday amidst the talk of this, and how aware is he? Obviously, his doctors and his aides have always said he's very aware, he's in good spirits. But I did notice on Sunday on the balcony, his nurse had to, basically, it seemed like he had to remind the Pope to give the blessing just before they went back inside. Now, maybe the Pope thought they had a little bit longer outside, he wasn't going to give the blessing just yet. Maybe there's a change of plan or something, or maybe he genuinely had completely forgotten the blessing. But I thought that was interesting just to get a gauge on. But I think really we'll have to wait and see going forward. It's early days and new stage of work.
He doesn't look good. He does not look healthy. And continue to pray for him to make, as Bishop Athanasius Snyder said yesterday, to clear his conscience before that day comes when he must stand before the judge. Let's all pray for that too.
Because you want more, and I want to give it to you. I'm rolling out a brand new membership program for the insiders of this channel. Join today. There's something for everyone. And because you could help me fund the next documentary film, the next book project, audio drama, audio narrations, and other projects that I have been dreaming to work on, but simply don't have the resources to accomplish. You and I together can do amazing things. You want more, and I want to give it to you. Just think about it. Whatever you can do at any level, any size, click below, join the team. We'd love to have you. God love you.